Facebook, there'll be silence, and then broadcast now. Hello everybody, welcome to our Wednesday webinar. We are just waiting for everyone to come into the webinar room. At the same time, I'm just trying to stream live to Facebook. Let's see if we can get this working this week. Fantastic. People are still coming in, so we'll just give it a few more seconds for people to come into the webinar room. And let me just check to see if we are on Facebook yet. I think that's working. Awesome. So welcome everybody to our BVNA webinar. My name is Wendy Nevins. I'm currently Senior Vice President of BVNA. I'm very excited to host this webinar this evening. We have Katie Ford, our speaker, and Lou, who is a council member, who's going to help me with the presentation tonight. If you haven't been on a webinar before, where have you been? If you haven't been on a webinar before, just a few top tips so to get the most out of the session this evening. If you have any questions, either technical questions for the team or questions for the speaker, there's a chat box in the toolbar. There's a black toolbar along the top or the bottom, depending on what device you're on. Click the chat bubble and you can type any questions into there. Also on that toolbar is a little microphone. If you have any audio problems, you can dial in on the telephone. So click that little up arrow and you can access a telephone number, a meeting ID and a participant ID. Dial in on the telephone and you'll still be able to see the presentation, but you should be able to hear down the telephone. That's it from me for now. I'll hand over to Lou, who's going to introduce our speaker. Thanks, Lou.
Thanks very much, Wendy. So this evening I would love to introduce our guest speaker, Katie Ford. Katie graduated with distinction from the University of Liverpool in 2012. Since then, she has continued to work in small animal first opinion practice, gaining her RCVS certificate in internal medicine in 2017. Realising the power of preventative mindset strategies through her career and journey, she trained as a coach and now teaches other veterinary professionals how to use these techniques to thrive in the veterinary world. She regularly helps individuals and companies on tough topics such as gratitude, self-worth and dealing with imposter syndrome. So without further ado, over to you, Katie.
Thank you very much for the lovely introduction, Lou. So I'm going to do a quick run through of what we're going to cover tonight. But first, I just wanted to thank you all for your time. That's the most valuable commodity that you've got. And to spend an hour here looking at the things that we can do regarding self-care and well-being and leading that up to mental health will be invaluable. So we're going to start with a quick agenda. So the first thing that I'm going to cover is I'm going to run through the importance of self-care, what it is. I'm going to introduce a little bit about simple ways to integrate it, so how we do that, having a look at the current climate that we're in, how to reduce the worry and uncertainty, and then try and understand the availability and the potential impact of external help in these circumstances as well. So anyone that knows much about me as a speaker will know that sometimes I integrate bits of my own story into the ways that I speak. And certainly for a long time as a vet in practice, I didn't focus very much on self-care at all. Despite being a caregiver to many others, I was not a caregiver to myself. And this did have detrimental longer term effects. So now it's a pleasure to be able to speak with you all on this topic this evening and just reiterate some of the what's, the hows, and the other options as well. So the first thing that I want to start with is, as we introduce the giant curveball COVID-19 that has been thrown at us all as this crazy roller coaster, I think we all need to remember this, that regardless of our job title, our years of experience, where we are, what we do, whether we're a vet, a nurse, receptionist, student, practice manager or client, we're all human. And we've all been affected in different ways, whether we've been on furlough, whether we've been working, whether we've been working from home, whether we've not had work and we've been a locum. And we've always got to remember that we only know our own story, as much as we think that we have a view of what's happening with other people from the outside. So I just emphasize for everyone to be kind, not only to ourselves, but to others, to be forgiving and to be non-judgmental. And I think one of the biggest messages that I get across to people is that you are enough, you're important, and you deserve looking after. And that's where self-care comes in. And as we've said before, being kind is the root of everything. And you'll find that we refer back to this time and time again. Now, one of the things that I'm going to reiterate throughout this webinar is that as much as we're doing self-care for ourselves, sometimes we need to get someone else involved. So you're going to find that throughout, I will keep referencing back to Vet Life, the amazing organisation that we have available to us as a profession. We know that mental health, we can have good mental health, poor mental health that we need help with. And if there's any time when mental health could potentially suffer, a global pandemic would likely be high on the list. So statistics from a 2009 paper said that 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health problem each year. That was before Covid-19. I, for a long time, fought alone without seeking any help. And I'll tell you, I really wish that I hadn't, because there's no stigma. If you're struggling, ask for help. Vet Life are there 24/7, anonymous, email, telephone support. They do financial help. They've got a whole wealth of information on that website, so please do check it out. If you want to screenshot this, if you want to take a picture of it, and if you're comfortable to share it, just so that people know this is an available facility for everyone in the profession. So let's move on to self-care itself. So I've put the pause button here because I think it's always useful for us all just to hit that pause button and reflect. We're all caregivers, but are we caregivers to ourselves? And we hear people say the cliched term, put your oxygen mask on first. And what does that actually mean? Well, when you think about it, if you are on a plane and you start trying to look after everyone else without your mask on, you're only going to be able to maybe help 2 or 3 people. If you put your mask on, you might be able to help the rest of the people on the plane. And again, another cliche, but it's true. We can't pour from an empty cup. So start thinking while you're here reflecting, what does self-care mean to you? What helps you? What makes a day a good day that's in your control? What can you add in to make a day better? And why do those things help you? Is it that it gives you some headspace? Is it that it relaxes you? Is it that it's fun and you enjoy it? Is it that it does that press the pause button? And do I integrate these things regularly? Or have these things maybe slipped by the wayside recently? And just take that time to reflect, which is super important. The definition itself of self-care is any activity that we deliberately do in order to take care of our physical, emotional, and mental health. And these are things that you want to do and that you enjoy. They might be things that you might not be that keen to do at the start, but you know that once you've done them, you'll feel better for it and that you'll enjoy it once you're doing it. But if there's something that feels like a chore, that's not so much self-care. And it might be that you want to look at something different that gives you a similar effect that you're aiming for, but through a different modality. So, as we said, is it something that I can integrate or I have control over? When we look at control, we're looking at, for example, it would be nice if the day was quiet, but we don't have control over which animals get sick or not. But we do have control over what am I going to do when I get home? Am I going to give myself a chance to take a pause? Are there any techniques that I can put into work whilst I'm there? And remember, the main thing is everybody is different. Everybody is going to have a very different view of self-care for them. And finding out what works for you and what helps is really, really important. One of the ways that I use an analogy of self-care, and this is something that I like to visualize it as, is I imagine that we're given one car when we're born, a vehicle. And they said, this is going to be the only car that you get for your entire life. You'd bet that you'd put good fuel in that, you'd look after it, you'd service it. If its tires were slightly deflated, you'd make sure you took the time to pump them up before you went on the motorway. And if you started hearing something strange, a strange noise, you go and get it checked out. At the same time, if someone crashed into you, you know you need to go and get some further assistance from elsewhere with that. And I always think of that in terms of, that's how I think of self-care for myself, that maintenance of the car, the vehicle being our bodies, being us. And I know that sometimes we'll need help from elsewhere. And self-care is almost just that ongoing maintenance that tries to enable us to better respond in those difficult times. Doesn't mean it's going to be the only thing that we do, but it may well just help on the more difficult days. So let's have a look. What different things can be classified as self-care? So we're thinking, what ingredients can I add into a day? What have we got influence over? What do we control? What mixture of these things can we add in? And there might even be things on this list that you'd never even considered as being self-care before. When you first reflected on what does self-care mean to you, it might have meant perhaps sitting and watching Netflix or a long bath or similar. And now you're looking at this list and saying, actually, there might be more to it. So if we look at physical, we're looking at exercise, sleep, nutrition, rest and relaxing. Some of these we're going to come on to in a bit more detail soon. Practical. So looking at routines, these are things that are going to practically be in place that might reduce stress for you. They might not be as enjoyable, but by proxy, they do a good job. So budgeting, organisation, maybe CPD. If you're learning about something that at work you've struggled with, it might help reduce that stress in the long term. Emotional, so gratitude, mindfulness, therapy, that might be with a professional therapist. It might be something ongoing that you've learned to use yourself. Medications prescribed potentially for mental health, but equally it might be chronic pain medications. There are going to be different things that are in this self-care kit for every person. So social interactions, meeting friends, maybe not so much at the moment, but hopefully at some point, phone calls, mental challenges, so reading, puzzles, learning, and spiritual, so whether that's meditation, yoga, self-reflection, religion, for example. Look at the things that are in our control that we might be adding into our lives, and these are all the available things that are out there. And just look down that list. Is there anything that I've considered adding in that I haven't tried? Are there any of these things that I already do? Are there any of these things on this list that I used to do that actually I wish that I'd carried on doing, and maybe this is the call to say, you know what, maybe I need to restart those. So we're going to delve a little bit deeper into these individually, just into a bit of the science behind them, just so that it might open your eyes to something potentially new that you'd not considered before. Or again, like we say, it might get you back to something that you'd already done previously. So remember, this is very personalized. What works for you might not work for someone else, and that's where reflection really comes in. So in terms of, for example, routine, if anyone caught Caroline Crow's brilliant presentation at Wellvet, you'll know that she talked about morning routines being one of the most common things for high performers. Now, this might not be so much that you go out in the morning and you go and do a 5-mile run and then drink a special milkshake and then have a whole 3-hour morning ritual. This might just be that you could set a morning up just to make it run a little bit smoother. So it might be that your clothes and everything are ready, what you need to take to work is ready, just to try and reduce the stress ingredients that are going in the morning. That might work for you, it might not work for some. Again, routine with a lot of the advice out there with the COVID situation is to try and stick to routines as best as you can do. That might be watching the same TV programs, listening to the same radio shows, and trying to keep a little bit of that consistency on board as well. The next thing down the list is when we look at sleep and rest. Now, this isn't just one of those token, oh, you should all get 7 to 8 hours sleep a night. And I know for some people, if you've got young children, this gets increasingly more challenging. And for others, if you do struggle with sleeping, there are more medical ways and there are therapists and people to talk to with it. But in general, there is a huge amount of evidence behind sleep, and it definitely shouldn't be ignored. They think that when we're on reduced sleep levels, there's increased risk of car accidents. They think that once we're less than 5 hours sleep, there's actually 0 people in their test groups that didn't have any type of impairment from that lack of sleep, either in response times or in concentration or in memory levels. So it is hugely, hugely important, and it affects our immune system. The other thing that it does on sort of an emotional level, and you'll hear more about the amygdala next week when you hear the amazing Libby Karen speak to you all. The amygdala is a section of our brain that's in charge of our emotional responses. And that can be sort of rage and anger that come up. And sleep, actually, when we're reduced on sleep, that amygdala is 60% more responsive. And that means we're more likely to have those emotions jump up if we are sleep deprived. So if there are ways that people can improve sleep, it's worth addressing. And this was certainly an eye-opener for me, even in fairly recent times. We then again look at nutrition. This isn't saying that everybody needs to go on crazy diets. This is just saying maybe in a self-care toolkit, nutrition is a really important point. Alongside this, we look at, there's a very strong link between the gut and the brain axis. And that's something that you can look into separately, but you'll see that if there's ways that we can integrate food that is going to be more fuel and make us have better energy levels and better nourished for the journey of what we're doing, then the better. Alongside that goes water. 2013 study said that dehydrated people had their cognitive abilities negatively affected. Caffeine, maybe for some people this makes things better. For others, it might be that they start to realize that perhaps they get more anxiety type levels with caffeine because of it being a stimulant. So just reflect on you and look at these things. Exercise, very broad ranging one. We get serotonin release, which is good, happy chemicals in terms of making us feel better. And there's so much variety out there in terms of exercise that you can put into a self-care regime now. We know that there's running, there's things like aerobics, CrossFit, yoga, Pilates, not so much team sports at the moment, but there are so many online classes and things to look at joining. Maybe this might be the time, if you're furloughed, to see if there's something that you might enjoy. Even if you are working longer hours, is there any way that you can integrate small amounts of exercise to get those boosts from the serotonin there? We look at sort of mindset and self-talk. Can we be kind to ourselves, like we've said? When things have happened at work, is there a way to talk more kindly to ourselves? Is it that we can say, you know, you tried your best at the time? I have a quote that I really like that anyone that follows me on social media has probably seen, but it says, every genuine mistake was simply a good intention that didn't go according to plan. And being forgiving to yourself on those circumstances, looking at failures as opportunities to grow. So these little tweaks and things can all be part of this toolkit. Interaction. This is when we're looking at integrating our interactions with other people. So there are studies saying that people have felt more connected, felt like they had lower anxiety levels, lower depression scores, and that created like a positive feedback loop. So that's not about going and chatting to loads of different people. That's just about fostering close relations that you've got. If you've got close friends, staying in touch with them. It is very much sort of quality over quantity as well. Then we look at kindness. There is a huge amount of work on kindness actually being cardioprotective. It releases oxytocin when we are kind, and that does have a cardioprotective effect, as well as many other beneficial effects. If anybody ever gets the time, go and look up Dr. David Hamilton, who used to work in the pharmaceutical industry. He worked on the placebo effect, but mainly in cardioprotective drugs, and he found a lot of information about the positive effects of kindness, not only to ourselves but to other people. Look at mindfulness. Again, there's a lot more information out there. Some people like to integrate this, but that's through 2014 review shown to improve anxiety and depression scores. And when we come back to that amygdala again, that reduces the activation of that area of our brain. So there's a lot of different things, as you can see, and it's about knowing that some things are going to work for some people better than others, and just having your eyes open to the fact that these things are all out there. Again, breathing exercises, these are meant to slow down our sympathetic nervous system. You'll find lots of techniques out there. The NHS website have a few on there. And these might be things that perhaps when we come to look at the integration, can you integrate these around consults? Can you integrate these through the day? Are these things that you can use and that they'll help? Capacity. And what I mean by capacity is saying no. Saying no isn't selfish. Sometimes it's an act of self-care. And I know certainly from my own experiences, I've previously been very much a people pleaser who wants to say yes to absolutely everything that she gets offered to do. And sometimes we've just got to take a step back, even if it's that we give ourselves a little bit of time and say, can I actually do this task within the time that I've got that I'd want to do it? Or is it something that I say, you know what, I could do that in a few months? Obviously, I know it goes different for when we're in work, but I'm talking more extra opportunities and things that you're taking on board. So is it that you've actually got, you might have the time to do it, but have you got the capacity to do it? Looking at, for example, lists, that could help with capacity. Focus on the things that you have done. Don't let the to-do list become the self-beating tool. I know certainly as a lot of us in the profession will zone into the things that we haven't done, but please don't do that. Look at the things that you did manage to do. Interestingly, with regard to capacity as well, on the NHS website, they talk very much about email stress and how a lot of people get email stress particularly. And they talk about the 4 Ds for emails. So they're saying either delete them, do it straight away if it's quick, delegate it to someone else, or defer it. So these are all different little tweaks and things. And again, we come to medications. They're obviously more prescribed medications, which will have their own set of evidence depending on what they've been prescribed for. And professional help, we'll keep coming back to this, but there is no stigma, no worry, no, please don't feel bad if you need to reach for that, because at the end of the day, these things with self-care are maintenance. And sometimes things get to that point where we just need someone to step in and help get us back to where we were. And you know, I waited to do that for so long, like I said previously. So now that we've said that, have a little think, maybe even draw yourself a diagram. Like, what's in your toolkit? What does it encompass? What are the important things to you? And just get clear on that, because there might be a few things now that have come up that you didn't actually realize were in your toolkit. Everybody's very different. For some people in that toolkit, their exercise might be mountain biking. Their mindful activity might be gardening. It might be that some days mindful activity is gardening, some days it's cleaning, some days it's actually doing mindful meditation, but just getting that headspace to be in the moment. So as you say, all very different for individuals. So when we come to the end of learning point 1, we can see the importance of self-care. All of these individual things have their own ingredient that they can bring, and it's finding what is the right combination of these things for you. And reflecting, now I've added those extra bits in for you. What is working? What might need tweaking? What positive effects could bringing these changes bring? What small changes can I make without overwhelming myself? And when do I start to get overwhelmed? Is it when there's lots of work going on? Is it when I've got too many tasks? And what can I do to make those things better on those days? And it might be that you need someone else to help you with that. So who might be able to help me with it? Who do I talk to? Is it friends? Is it colleagues? Is it partners? Is it that I get more professional help? Is there a counsellor or a therapist? Just thinking, who's on your team, as it were. So let's start looking at how we can actually start to integrate some of this. So this was a very popular image that was shared throughout the vet world a few months back, and I think it rung true with a lot of people. What I thought would make me productive, hard work, versus what actually does make me productive, a mixture of all of the other things. And I think at the beginning of lockdown, I might not be wrong to say that there were a lot of posts banding around saying this is going to be an opportunity for those that aren't at work to do X, Y, Z. And I think there was quite a lot of pressure built up on people to feel like they needed to be, quote, productive. And ultimately, we all need to come through in a good place, but we don't need to come through being able to do the splits and the backflip and all these extra things. If you've got time to do those and you want to do them, brilliant. But again, it comes back to being kind to yourself. You don't have to do all these extra things. We just have to make sure we're looking after you. So how are we going to start integrating it? So first of all, like we said previously, let's remember that it's personalized. So let's look at what works for you as an individual. One thing that I've found quite helpful, and a lot of people that I speak to do, is looking at the process of actually forming habits. So The first thing that I'd say is one fantastic resource to look at is one of the world leaders in habit forming. Is a gentleman called James Clear, who wrote a book called Atomic Habits. And he talks about new habits, making them less than 2 minutes, so they're very easy to do, and trying to maybe even stack them on something that you already do, and then maybe tracking to see how well that's going. So one example of this might be, if in your self-care toolkit, it's very important for you to get outside, which it is for me. I like walking. I feel like it's quite a mindful activity for me. It gives me good headspace. I started with saying, right, every day I'm just going to put my trainers on. I'm going to step out the door. I'm going to walk to the bottom of the street and come back. And the vast majority of days, once I was out there and I started, I carried on. But sometimes that was all that I could do. That was all that was going to fit into the day. But I started making a habit of it. And that meant that even on the busier days, I was still turning up to do it. That's just one technique. This isn't something you need to get hung up on and definitely do. It's just an idea. And with that comes setting yourself up for success. With everything that you do on the self-care front, like we say, and we said right at the beginning, these are things that you want to do. They're good ingredients to add in, the things that help you. So try and make it as easy for yourself as possible. So for example, when we're looking at if you're having a tougher day, so like we say here, the tough day toolkit, is it that you want to set up and make it easy that you've got something good and nutritious to eat at home, if that's possible? Is it that you want to set up that morning routine, that everything's there for you in the morning so you can focus on taking it a little bit more steady first thing? What little tweaks could you make when you reflect? And allowing that reflection time. So let me look back. What worked for me? What didn't work for me? What would I change? And if you're a person that's an avid diary writer, or you've got a calendar, block off the time for you where possible. You know, quite often we are all caregivers. We get swept into our own routines of doing work. And sometimes we forget to prioritize ourselves and to put that oxygen mask on first. So whether that's that you just block off time that you can do whatever you want, you might block off time to relax, whatever works for you. So the second stage of integrating self-care, like we say, be kind to yourself. I always bring it back to being your own best friend. And on reflection, years back, I would not have had any friends if I treated myself or treated my best friend in the way that I used to treat me. I would probably have got her at home, sat her on the couch, barely fed her, told her to watch a few movies of everything that had happened during the day, and then tell her all the things that she'd done wrong. And instead, when I think about it in terms of actually being kind and being your own best friend, it's coming home saying, look, you've had a busy day. Let's get you something good to eat. Let's do something that you actually enjoy. Let's talk to the people that you enjoy talking to. And let's do all the things that make this a good day that are in our control. And I always ask myself the question, where is your focus? Am I focusing on all the things that went wrong today? Or can we shift that focus to the things that went right? And who else can I speak to? So like we said previously, when we look at who can I speak to, that might be friends, that might be family, that might be therapists, that might be people that are in the medical profession, but sometimes it's just a good chat with a friend. And then we're looking at ongoing versus tough days. So we want to set it up for us to be as easy as possible on these tough days. Like we say, have some good meals in the freezer or something that you can get your hands on that makes it easier for you to eat something nutritious. And whatever you're doing as self-care, be present with it. And when we come back to the where is your focus question, I realised that when I went through the list of importance of self-care, one thing that I missed out that is ironic because it's ultra important is actually gratitude. And this is something you can actively put your focus towards. Gratitude is something that anyone that gets BNG will realise that I had a paper this week that came out on gratitude called the Gratitude Attitude. And it is something that's got so much scientific evidence behind the use of it that it's well worth considering adding into a self-care regime. Now, gratitude does something to a section of our brain called the reticular activating system, which again, if you listen in next week to Libby Karen's lecture, I'm absolutely sure she'll mention that. She's brilliant. This section of our brain that is like a sophisticated filter. So whatever we've put our attention to for long enough, it will try and drag your focus to it. So when we do gratitude, we're making our brain to start to look for the things that we're grateful for. And that in its own right, when we're actually grateful for something, we release serotonin, which again has its benefits, definitely. So that RAS system is the same system that when you're starting to look for a certain type of a car, for example, and you start to see them everywhere and you think, oh my goodness, were there actually this many cars on the road before that were of the one that I want? Or is it just that I'm spotting them more now? Or you learn a new word and then suddenly you hear that word everywhere. The same thing goes with gratitude. So when you're saying, where is my focus? One way to consider integrating it would be gratitude journaling. That might be that every night you just write down sort of 5 things that you're grateful for and why. You might just do it while you're brushing your teeth. You might think about those things that you're grateful for rather than actually even physically writing them down if time is difficult. Or through the day, just a few things that you're grateful for as a grounding. So these are all things that have got science behind them that are potentially integrated. I say apologies that I missed that one. The irony that I had the article out on that too. So when we're looking at integrating, like, where can I integrate these things? At work, at home, have a look and reflect on what you're doing. What are the things that make a day a good day or a better day for you that you have control over, that you could start to integrate in these situations, either by doing a little bit at a time or making those little tweaks, trying things out and seeing how they work. So at work, what could I consider? Maybe getting outside, maybe exercise. Maybe at lunchtime, it might be that you just want to have a 5 or 10 minute walk. Maybe that might help. Nutrition. We are absolutely known for having biscuits and chocolates everywhere, which I'm not saying don't eat them. I eat a good amount of them myself, but I've tried the chocolate and Haribo diet and it did not work out well for me. See if you can prepare. Is there anything that I can bring into work that I'm able to bring in and like leave that makes it easier for me to get something that's good? Or can I take lunch with me? Or where can I plan to go and get lunch? And just see if there's tweaks that you can make. Teamwork, so looking after each other. Is there anything that you can talk with each other to try and make it that you all get a little bit of a break during the day? That might be up to more of the people higher up, but it's worth considering. Do you feel like you get overwhelmed when a lot of tasks are coming all at once? And I know a lot of nurses are very, very organised and will have their lists of things to do, but maybe something like that might help in terms of self-care. When we went back to the beginning and we were saying about practical self-care and that organisation, could it be that writing things down and making that list, so you say, right, I've written it down, I'm going to come back to it, and you don't feel like you're juggling 20 things at once in your head? We talked about breathing exercises already. Is it that there's anything that you could integrate at work on that front? I certainly use these a lot, even between consults. There's people out there that explain these in far better detail than me, but that might be something you could integrate between consults. And boundaries for working from home. Is it that you can say, look, these days I'm working these times, tell other people in the house that they're the times you're working to, so you're accountable? Again, another brilliant tip from Caroline was, if you get into the end of the day and you think, I've got a lot more things to do, just say to yourself, if I had an extra hour, what would I write down that I need to do? And then just make that the list for the next day. Like we say, everybody is worthy of being looked after, and we need to look after ourselves and be kind to ourselves, especially in the current climate. And all these things are tweaks that we could make. And then when we look at home, what could I consider? We'll come back to end of work routine in a minute as well, but how can I make my life easier for myself if possible? How can I set it up that maybe after there's been a busier day at work, how can I make it so that it's very straightforward to do these things that I know when it's a normal day and a non-busy day, I can find time for easily? Social contact, which friends can I message or get in touch with? It's not that you have to go out there and show up at every group Zoom call, but is there someone I can have a quick chat with? Schedule that time for yourself, being present in the tasks that you do. Is there anything, when we talked about sleep, that perhaps a sleep or a night routine might be doable or tweakable? So a lot of people talk about switching their phone off a certain amount before bedtime. Is it that you look at when your caffeine intake is. For some people, they can drink caffeine just before bed and still go to sleep. Other people will have caffeine late in the afternoon, like me, and feel the effects of it even at bedtime. And is it that maybe you want to eat at certain times before bed to make sure that you're not going to bed on a full stomach? Sometimes possible, sometimes not. But just little tweaks to consider that might be able to help you get some of the benefits from these self-care techniques. So keep taking that time to press the pause button and reflect, how can I be kinder to me? What can I do that's going to make me as well as I can be in these circumstances? One really good resource is the Professional Quality of Life Scale. You'll see this is used in a lot of papers. This was based on a lot of research. They've got a brilliant website, and they deal with a lot about compassion fatigue and compassion satisfaction. And these are pocket cards that they have that are available on their website to print out and to keep for at home as well. And they list the things that we could do in the day to try and maintain our energy levels and maintain our compassion as well. So we've talked about most of these things already, but perhaps these might be a good reminder. So get enough sleep, get enough to eat, vary the work that you do. We're in a profession where it is mostly always varied. Do some light exercise. Is there anything that I can try and integrate while I'm in practice? People talk about things like having skipping ropes in practice, which may or may not work for some people. Is there anything, for example, the guys at VetFit, they talk about integrating small amounts of exercise, even in the consult room. I'm appreciative at the moment it's very busy in a lot of clinics, so maybe that might not be doable, but they're just all food for thought. Do something pleasurable that you enjoy. Focus on the things that you did well. Like we say, where's your focus? What went well today? What am I grateful for? Learn from your mistakes. So remember, mistakes don't make you a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes at times. So again, coming back to being kind to yourself. Share a private joke. We know that smiling and laughing is known to reduce the stress response and reduce blood pressure as well. Some people might be religious and want to pray. Others might meditate. Others might just relax. And supporting colleagues, that's not that we have to have a therapy or a counselling session with colleagues, but just a quick check-in, make sure they're okay. Again, remember that cardioprotective effect of kindness. And this is the second half of the pocket card that they have, which is where they actually focus on the switching off from work and off work modes, which I found really interesting. And again, these are all just ideas and food for thought, so please don't feel pressured to have to do all of them. And as it says here, your empathy for others helps you to do your job. It's important to take good care of your feelings and thoughts by monitoring how you use them. The most resilient workers are those that know how to turn their feelings to work mode when they go on duty, but off work mode when they go off. This is not denial, it's a coping strategy. It's a way they get maximum protection while working and maximum support while resting. This might be something that you reflect on and you decide how you could do yourself. Saying here, switching off, make it a conscious process. Talk to yourself as you switch. I talk in a lot of my posts as if I felt like I have a little negative voice that tells me about all the cases that have gone on during the day. And with sort of a going off work mode, I just say to myself, look, there's nothing I can do about it now. They're in good hands. All my patients are in good hands overnight. I did my best during the day. Says here about using images that make you feel safe and protected and connected and cared for, depending on which switch. Rituals as you switch off and stop and start work. That might even be as simple as you take your work uniform off if you don't do that already and you put normal clothes on. And breathe slowly and deeply to calm yourself when starting a tough job. Again, that comes down to those breathing techniques. So you can see how these little things just keep coming up again and again. What I don't want to do, I don't want you to get overwhelmed with all the different options here. All that they are just to introduce you to potential little tweaks and things that might help. And you might say, you know what, maybe that would work for me. And I know that in terms of actually having these routines and these rituals, maybe it might be that part of that is you thank everyone before you leave work, or you say thanks to someone, or you think consciously about a few things that went well. Think about that focus. Write down anything that you want to do tomorrow and think, right, it's written down, that's for work. And just think on these things. Check the website out, it's very helpful as well. And then the third point that we've got is to reduce our worry and uncertainty. Because at the moment, we've been bombarded with a lot of different information from a lot of different sources. So what can we do? The first thing to reduce worry and uncertainty is talk. Decide who it is that you're going to talk to. Is it just that you're going to chat with close family and friends? Pick the people who are a good influence in your life to speak to. That might also be talking to therapists. It might be talking to Vet Life. Like we say, there's nothing wrong with doing that. They're a brilliant service and they're there for a reason. Limit the media exposure. So we all know that we've been bombarded with a lot of different information. Use reliable sources. There's a lot of fake news out there. And again, a considerate use of social media. I'm one of the first people to advocate the use of social media in our profession in terms of some of the brilliant and amazing things that it can do. You can learn a lot, you can connect with people, I certainly have. But at the same time, always remember that a lot of a social media feed is just a highlights reel. And please don't fall into the comparison trap. Like, I talk about it a lot on my feed, but the odds of us being here are 1 in 400 trillion, which is pretty mad. We're all completely unique. You can't compare that to each other. There's no point comparing to someone else's highlights reel on Instagram. You don't see everything that goes on behind the scenes. And thinking about, is it that I want to limit my time on here? Do I want to look at which areas that I actually go into, and finding out what works for you? And we keep coming back to the same things again, but focus what's in your control. What can you actually change? What's certain? Look at your routine, and the things that you can't control, we can only control our response to them. Look at thought balancing. So remember that thoughts aren't facts. Everything that we think isn't necessarily true. There's things that are true, there's things that aren't true, and there's a whole grey area in between. So maybe have a few questions that you ask yourself, like, what would I say to a friend? Talk to a friend even about it. Is there another way to see it? Am I overestimating the chance of a disaster here? Like we say, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, so there's a lot of extra information being thrown at us at the moment. So please do be kind to yourself. Having a bad or a wobbly day doesn't make us a bad person, it makes us a human. It's just knowing what those things are that we do to help ourselves on those days, and what we do on the better days as well to try and maintain that helps us. And again, we keep coming back to the where is my focus question. One of the things that is also very important too is, in terms of a lot of stress and uncertainty, I know for a lot in the profession at the moment is going to be financial concerns. And way back, this was me too. And I'll tell you now, just actually seeking support and being open and realizing what situation I was actually in was a huge relief. I ran from it for a long time, and knowing that we've got people like Vet Life, again, the BVNA have the Daphne Shipman Benevolent Fund, which is for those with medical illness that are struggling financially. There's more information on the website about that. We've got Citizens Advice, we've got government support, we've got VetU community who've been set up with a lot of financial advice and information. They don't give funds, but there is a lot of information out there. So try and turn your focus to what can I do about this? Who can help me with it? So the availability and impact of external help is point number 4. As much self-care and all these things that we can do, sometimes it's not enough, and there is absolutely no shame in that. Like, sometimes as much gratitude and as much exercise and as much good food as we eat, we need someone just to come and help us realign us with these thoughts, and maybe medications or whichever way that it goes. And I think being aware of these external sources of help is so important. And like this quote says here, I'm the captain of my ship and the master of my fate, but never feel like you have to sail alone, is so important. I, for a very long time, felt like I had to fix everything myself, and it turned out nothing was broken. It was just lost. And getting other people to help me was the way that I got back to being me. So please do remember that these sources of help are there, especially if these things externally aren't helping. So I've said here, asking for help is not a fault, it's a strength. There's always Vet Life. They're anonymous, 24/7, phone and email. You can chat to them sometimes just to get a non-biased point of view. is really helpful, and know that they're there. They're a brilliant source of information. There's the Samaritans as well. There's BVNA advisory service. It might be that it's something that you want to talk about that's going on at work. There are lots of different things, NHS helplines as well, and talking with family and friends. So just knowing at this time where we are, it is not a fault to need to use any of these services. They're there for a reason. And like we said right at the beginning, 1 in 4 people in a normal year will have some form of mental health issue. But at the same time now, we've been thrown with a huge amount of change. So I think at the moment, a lot of reflection and knowing that you've actually got to the point that we are here. And we didn't have to come out of lockdown knowing 20 new skills or comparing to everything that's going on everywhere else. And the biggest message I keep saying is just be kind to yourself. So in our summary, self-care is vital for well-being. It's not just every now and again. It's something that I want you to just reflect on and think, where can I put this in a daily basis? It might not be that you can go for a full run every day, but maybe it's just that you have a brief walk outside. Think about what it's giving you, the things that you like doing. Is it that I just want to spend some time with people that I know? Is it that I want to laugh? Is it that I enjoy the buzz of exercise? And just the little bits that you could do on a daily basis that are doable, that still give you that on the days where you can't do the full amount. Self-care toolkits are personalised and specific to you. I could say try new things, but don't be mad with yourself if it doesn't work and doesn't suit you. Maybe there's something else out there. Reflection and small steps are important. Be kind to yourself. This will forever be a hugely important thing. Like we say, we're in a global pandemic. Be kind, be forgiving to yourself, be non-judgmental. And seeking help is sometimes the most important act of self-care that we can do. And there are so many amazing sources of information out there to do this. And my final reminder for you all is that self-care isn't selfish. So many times you feel like you have to go out there and save everyone else before you put that oxygen mask on. But hopefully this has been a reminder that you're enough, you're special, you're worthy of being looked after. And this will help us all serve so much better if we can do these things and tweak these things. So hopefully that's been useful to everybody. If anyone wants any of the references or any of the information from it further, let me know. And like we said right at the beginning, always remember that Vet Life are a brilliant resource and always there for us.
Super. Thank you very much, Katie, for that amazing presentation. If anybody has any questions, please do type them into the question box in the chat box, and we'll try and get through as many as we can. Thank you very much, Katie.
You're very welcome. Thank you everyone for listening.
Okay, so we've had some comments more than questions. So we've had a comment here to say, can I say this is one of the best mental health talks I have listened to?
Oh, thank you.
I have worked throughout this COVID-19 and found the workplace is better to be for my mental health. Having a smaller team working together made me feel better. I am working longer days, but I found a 15-minute workout to do before work.
Good. And that's a brilliant reflection as well, to see that even in spite of everything that has been going on, that you've realised these things that can help, and you've actually seen the good in it too. So amazing, brilliant.
And a few more comments, and then we have got some questions from Facebook as well. If anybody wants to write some comments in, the other attendees can't see your comments, so we do try to keep things as confidential as possible. So the other comments, this has been an invaluable reminder of self-care. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie. Wonderful, thanks so much. Fantastic webinar. Thank you, really informative and relevant. Just some lovely comments. I've got a question here in the middle of the comments. Do you have any tips for minding your mental health within a negative team of vets and nurses?
I do. I mean, one thing is, I found, because I locum, so I go in a lot of different teams, quite often I try and redirect the conversations. when I'm talking about something. So if we end up on a negative topic, I try and look after myself in terms of I'll start a new topic altogether. So I might say to them, what are you doing at the weekend? What's this? And I also try and be the change as well. So I try and go in, and sometimes there are going to be days that aren't so positive in practice, but that will probably be my main tip, will be try and redirect the conversation. You can't control what other people are doing. You can only control what you're doing. And I think sometimes just accepting that is the first step, and then maybe trying just to redirect conversations a little bit, and still being kind to yourself.
Thank you very much, Katie. I think I'm just looking, there's so many comments. Thank you so much. This webinar has helped me at a challenging time. Thank you, really enjoyed this talk. I think, Lou, do we have some questions from Facebook as well, Lou?
Yes, we do. The lovely comments have been absolutely pouring in as well on Facebook, Katie. So thank you so much. That was so helpful. Really, really liberating. I feel really motivated and empowered myself now. So the few questions that we had come through, the first one was how to boost team morale. So it was a little bit like the question you had a moment ago. So you said about redirecting conversation. Do you have any other tips that you would add to that on top to sort of bring people together?
Other things that I'd say as well, I think gratitude is incredibly powerful. So I think if there's anything as a team that you can try and do to try and focus gratitude as well, whether that's that you have like a gratitude board in either the staff room or somewhere that's a communal area, just to try and get everybody's mind tweaked towards the things that you are grateful for. Maybe all come together and just think, if you can try and come up with a decision as a group, like what can we do to try and boost things here, and what ingredients are we all putting in, and then you all feel like you're moving forward as a team from there too. Because I think, and I can't remember the paper, but I know they've proven that in some ways, sometimes a mindset can be almost contagious in a way. So I think the ones that are wanting to take it forward, try and get everyone together and talk about what you could do moving forward to be more positive in practice. What little tweaks, what little acts of kindness could you do? What gratitude could we integrate? And that will be my starting place, really.
That's lovely. That's really, really, really good idea. The next one I have is, do you have any advice and tips on managing those that are on furlough to sleep at night?
I think in terms of sleeping at night, it is a very individualized thing. I mean, certainly, I know I touched on it a little bit in the integrating self-care, the second learning point, where we talked about like looking at reducing screen time and things before bed. Is it that we can just keep our room just for sleeping and not start doing work and things in there? I know there's a lot of different theories on it. If you are really struggling, sometimes it is worth speaking to someone about it and just seeing, is there any underlying reason why I can't sleep at the moment? Another one is, I've heard it a few times before, in terms of if you get into bed and you're not asleep within the first 20 minutes or half an hour, maybe it's worth getting up, doing something else and coming back to it, and just finding what works for you, certainly.
Thank you. And then I've just had one come through about how to manage the feeling of guilt of letting your team down when you're signed off for your health.
It is very individualized. The first thing that I say is, and like we said when we were looking at the thought balancing, just remember that thoughts aren't facts. Remember that even though you might be thinking that everybody feels bad that you're off, for example, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. They probably miss you and care about you. And again, it comes down to being kind to yourself. If you're signed off because you're not well, you've just got to focus on you being well, because if you're going not well, then that doesn't put you in a good position to serve well with the team. So just, it keeps coming back down to the same things, but be kind to yourself, talk to your team about how you feel, talk to friends, talk to family, and they'll reassure you that the guilt, although it feels it, likely isn't warranted.
Lovely, thank you. And then the final one I have, which I think you have covered already, really, which is tips for switching off at the end of the day. You said about making sure you take your uniform off, and little things like that can make a massive difference. Do you have any more tips along those lines?
I'd probably say you're absolutely right. So taking the uniform off, maybe consciously just coming up with a routine that you do each time when you finish work, whether that's that you take a certain bag into work and you hang that up and you leave it on one side, whether it's that you switch notifications off on your phone, whether it's if you don't work in clinic and you work in office, maybe you put an out of office response on. And even consciously almost saying to yourself, right, I've done my best that I could do today. I know I can't do any more than that, and now's my time to rest. And writing down everything that you think needs doing at work tomorrow and leaving that in the bag until tomorrow. So it's going to be a matter of just tweaking what does work with you. We all have those little thoughts that pop in and go, oh my goodness, what if this happens at work? Or what if this has happened? That was certainly one of the things that was in my story that led to great struggles for me. And I think now I know that we all sometimes have those thoughts pop up, and sometimes you just say, you know what, I can't deal with this until tomorrow, or message and have a quick chat with a colleague if you've got worries.
Thank you, Katie. That's it from me. So thanks so much for answering those questions.
No problem. Thank you for all the questions.
Thanks for your help with the Facebook streaming, Lou. I appreciate that. So we had so much positive feedback. So thank you so much, Katie, for giving your time up to talk to us. These webinars are normally a member-only benefit, but we are opening these up to the profession during the current situation. So we are streaming live on Facebook. It is being recorded, so if you feel you have colleagues or friends or family who would benefit from watching this video, the recording will be available and you can access that through our social media. Comments are scrolling in. Thank you so much, Katie. Great to have such practical advice. Thank you very much, everyone. So this webinar has helped me at a challenging time. So many positive questions. So thank you very much, Katie. For all of our attendees, thank you very much for joining us yet again. There's another webinar that was alluded to by Katie next Wednesday. Details will be on our social media and emailed out. At the end of this webinar, there will be a survey monkey, so please do give us your feedback. It's important that we deliver webinars, but our members and the wider profession want the correct time, the correct length, and what topics you want to cover. So please do give us a feedback. The BVNA is here as a membership association. We're here for our members. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm just checking we've not got any last minute questions in before I let you go.
Thank you very much for having me come and speak, and thank you for all the very lovely comments. I shall look forward to seeing you all at Congress.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Katie. Thank you very much, Lou, for helping me this evening, and see everybody same time next week for another webinar. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.